The chow
Order
line curled
arms!
across the melting concrete of Ridgepoint Base, each pair of boots grinding dust into the already
Miles!
sunburned ground. The
Look at her,
summer
she's
heat
about to
made
cry.
tempers thin, and every joke carried a sharper
Go
edge than it
home,
should have.
little girl!
Sergeant Lily Adams waited
You don't
just like the
belong here.
others, her sleeves pushed up in the sweltering air. That tiny detail was enough. The inked swallow on her forearm, small, dark, unmistakable, caught the attention of a few infantrymen behind her. One let out a smirk big enough for the whole line to hear. What's that supposed to be?
Look at
A
that!
little bird to scare off the bad guys? Laughter cracked through the heat, quick, thoughtless,
Keep going.
aimed directly at her. Lily didn't move. She didn't defend herself. She simply stared ahead, tray steady in her grip, silence wrapped around her like
Look at her,
armor.
she's about to cry.
They thought they understood her.
Go
They didn't.
home, little girl!
Not even close. Before we
belong
dive in,
here.
make sure to subscribe for more military and veteran stories that honor courage, sacrifice, and the heroes among us. And tell us in the comments,
You don't belong
where are you
here.
watching from today? Summer heat pressed over Elk Ridge, Colorado, turning the military outpost of Ridgepoint Base into a shimmering mirage of dust, metal, and quiet discipline. Sergeant Lily Adams, 29, moved through that heat like a shadow carved from patience. She was a slender woman of medium height, with amber-brown skin that warmed under sunlight, and dark hair always tied into a low, disciplined knot. Her face bore gentle features, soft around the jaw, but her eyes, deep hazel with flecks of muted gold, carried the stillness of someone who had learned long ago to breathe carefully through pain. She had the posture of a person who lived between invisibility and vigilance, shoulders slightly drawn, chin set at a modest angle, every gesture precise as though she feared wasting motion. She belonged to the logistics division, where her world was crates, manifests, broken printers, and the endless hum of fluorescent lights. And though she did her job perfectly, she lived in a strange drift between respect and dismissal, tolerated but underestimated. On her left forearm, revealed whenever she rolled her sleeves in the summer heat, spread a small inked swallow mid-flight. The lines were simple yet too deliberate to be decorative. To most soldiers on base, it looked like a sentimental stamp, feminine and out of place among dog tags and dust. To Lily, it was a breath of memory she never spoke aloud. As she walked across the yard with a clipboard pressed to her chest, a group of infantry soldiers lounged near the vehicle bay. Their uniforms were rumpled, boots dusty, laughter loud enough to bounce off the motor pool walls. Leading them was Private Mason Cooper, 23, broad-shouldered and sharp-jawed, with cropped blonde hair that perpetually stuck up from sweat and sun. Mason was energetic in the way of young men who thought the world still owed them victories. He joked hard, laughed loudly, and believed strength was best proven in public. But beneath his swagger lived a bitterness he didn't show. The bitterness of a man rejected from elite selection after he had trained for it his whole youth. So when his pride ached, he looked for easier targets. Today, Lily was one of them. "There goes the bird lady again," Mason called, not loud enough for an officer to hear, but perfectly timed for his friend's amusement. "Someone ask her if that tattoo comes with matching earrings." The group laughed, a rough ripple through the hot air. Lily did not turn. She rarely turned. She walked as if her silence was a shield she kept polished. Yet something faint tightened behind her ribs, a small, trembling tension she had mastered hiding. She told herself not to care, told herself they didn't know her, told herself she was used to it. But cruelty, even mild cruelty, had a way of catching on the edges of old wounds. When she reached the shade of the supply building, she saw movement in the corner of her vision. A large figure stepping out from behind the storage crates. It was Ranger, the aging German shepherd known around base as the retired K9. Nobody quite knew what to do with. Ranger was 12 years old, with fur once rich black and tan now faded along his muzzle to a gray that softened like winter frost. His ears were still sharp, erect with dignity, though one bore a small notch scar that hinted at a violent past. His gait had slowed over the years, but the strength in his chest and the intelligence in his amber eyes had never diminished. Soldiers respected him distantly, the way people respect old warriors they've heard stories about, but never fully known. Ranger usually wandered the edges of the base, visiting anyone who offered him scraps or a pat on the head. Yet when he saw Lily, his entire posture changed. His ears perked sharply, his tail lifted slightly, and he trotted toward her with a familiarity that surprised even him. Lily paused, meeting his gaze, and for a fleeting heartbeat, something ancient flickered between them. Recognition, sorrow, a shared thread of memory buried beneath years of silence. Ranger stopped beside her, sitting against her leg, with a low, rumbling sound that was not a growl, but something like possessive reassurance. A few soldiers across the yard stared. "Weird," someone muttered. "He doesn't do that for anyone." Lily kept her voice low, barely a breath. "Hey, old boy, still hanging around me?" She touched Ranger's head gently, fingers brushing the rough fur along his spine. The action was small, but inside her chest something loosened, something she had kept locked for too many years. Because Ranger was not just a dog who happened to like her. He was the echo of another life, another unit, another version of herself that she had buried far away in a valley she vowed never to revisit. In the heat of the yard, as dust curled around their feet and laughter lingered unpleasantly in the distance, Ranger leaned into her side like the last surviving witness of a truth she never spoke. Lily swallowed hard, eyes tightening with a feeling too complicated to name. "I thought you'd forgotten me, Ranger," she whispered. His tail thumped once, and in that small gesture, under the brutal summer sun of Elkridge, something long dormant stirred awake, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably alive. The chapter ends here, exactly with Lily realizing Ranger still remembers her. The wind carried the scent of heated metal and sun-baked asphalt across Ridgepoint Base as the afternoon wore on, shimmering like a veil over the distant mountains. Lily Adams stood near the open warehouse doorway, with Ranger at her heel, the old German shepherd's ears twitching at each distant clang of machinery. She felt strangely exposed with him beside her, as if his presence tugged memories she had spent years stitching shut. Yet she didn't push him away. Something about him, the familiar weight of his gaze, made her feel both steadier and more breakable. She took a slow breath, letting the dry air settle in her lungs, before turning toward the supply desk inside. But the moment she stepped in, someone nearly collided with her. "Sergeant Adams." "Oh, sorry." The voice belonged to Corporal Daniel Reyes, a communications technician no older than 22. Daniel was short and wiry, with light brown skin, tightly curled black hair, and nervous hazel eyes that always flickered as though he was calculating frequencies even when no radios were around. He had a naturally anxious smile, and though polite, he carried himself like a person constantly waiting to be corrected. Growing up with a strict single father who'd served 2 tours had carved a quiet fear of failure deep into him. Today, he held a crate of radio parts awkwardly against his chest. Lily steadied him. It's fine, Reyes. Just breathe. Yes, ma'am, he said, cheeks warming. Then he noticed Ranger. His eyes widened. Is he following you now? Lily didn't answer. Ranger stepped forward, sniffing Daniel with a slow, deliberate confidence. The corporal stiffened, unsure whether to smile or salute. Ranger approved of him with a soft snort, then returned to Lily's side. Daniel exhaled with relief. Lucky you, he said, shifting the crate. He doesn't even look twice at most of us. Before Lily could respond, a voice cut sharply across the warehouse. Reyes, quit flirting with the floor and move those crates. Staff Sergeant Kurt Donovan, the motor pool overseer, strode in with the swagger of a man who believed volume solved everything. Kurt was in his late 30s, tall and thick-necked, with a square jaw hidden beneath several days of patchy stubble. His skin was heavily tanned from years of working around vehicles, and his forearms bulged with the strength of someone who treated wrenches like extensions of his hands. He wasn't cruel, but his temper flared quickly, sharpened by a divorce that had hollowed him out last winter. Since then, he carried irritation like a second uniform. Daniel scrambled away. Kurt's gaze landed on Lily. Adams, didn't expect your shift to overlap with ours today. His tone wasn't mocking, but it wasn't warm either. Need something signed? Lily lifted her clipboard. Just verifying serials for the new shipments. Kurt grunted. Figures. You logistics types always have your heads buried in, paperwork. Ranger, sensing the shift, stepped slightly forward. Kurt blinked. Huh. Thought that mutt only listened to K9 handlers. He listens to who he trusts, Lily said quietly. Well, good for you then, Kurt muttered, though he looked more puzzled than annoyed. Ranger's eyes stayed fixed on him, as though measuring him against memories Lily could not see. Lily moved deeper into the warehouse, checking crates and jotting notes as she went. Ranger followed with slow, deliberate steps. Every now and then he paused, sniffing the air, as if searching for something not present, a scent carried from another lifetime. Lily tried focusing on her work, but her mind kept drifting. She remembered the valley, the fractured radio signals, the frantic decoding, the breathless tension of waiting for men she had never seen to trust a voice they never met. She remembered the sound of Ranger barking in the background of a transmission, sharp and terrified. She had never forgotten that sound, even though she had never known him by name until years later. Ranger nudged her leg with his nose, pulling her out of the memory's grip. She swallowed hard. Across the warehouse, Mason Cooper entered with two friends. Their boots echoed too loudly, their laughter too harsh in the enclosed space. Lily felt her shoulders stiffen instinctively. Daniel Reyes glanced nervously between them and Lily, sensing incoming trouble. Kurt Donovan noticed too. Cooper, he warned, don't start anything. Mason smirked, but didn't back down. Relax, Sarge. We're just grabbing gear. But when his eyes landed on Ranger pressed against Lily's leg, his smirk faltered. Weird. Since when do retired dogs have favorites? Ranger's low growl vibrated through the floor. Mason stepped back instinctively. Okay, no offense, old man, he muttered. Lily placed a hand on Ranger's neck, steadying him. His muscles loosened under her touch. Daniel approached her timidly. Sergeant, he really does act like he knows you. She didn't look up from her clipboard. Maybe he does. But Ranger did more than act familiar. He leaned into her, eyes softening with an ache she recognized. A look she had once seen in the mirror after the Valley mission ended, and she was reassigned silently, swallowed by bureaucracy. There had been no after-action brief, no medals, no explanations. Only a quiet transfer request and years of pretending the world had always been this small. She whispered, "Ranger, how long have you been waiting?" Ranger's tail thumped once, solemnly. Behind them, Mason Cooper paused at the exit, confusion knitting his brow as if he sensed something he couldn't name. But he said nothing and left. The warehouse door swung shut with a metallic thud. Lily let out a slow breath. Ranger rested his head against her knee, and in that soft contact, she felt it clearly now. The beginning of something shifting, something inevitable, something she no longer had the strength to outrun. The chapter ends with Lily realizing Ranger remembers not just her, but the mission they survived together. By late afternoon, the heat in Elkridge had settled into a heavy stillness, the kind that made every shadow stretch long across Ridgepoint Base as if time itself were dragging its feet. Lily Adams walked toward the administrative wing with Ranger close at her side, the old German shepherd's paws tapping lightly on the concrete. His presence felt like a quiet drumbeat at her heel, a reminder that whatever she had tried to bury was now pacing beside her in the open. She tried to focus on her task, delivering updated inventory forms, but her mind lingered on the tension in Ranger's muscles, the way his gaze kept drifting to the perimeter as though scanning for threats only he remembered. Inside the building, the hum of air conditioning replaced the desert heat. As Lily stepped into the hallway, she nearly collided with a woman exiting an office. "Oh, excuse me," Lily said, steadying herself. The woman blinked in surprise, offering a warm smile. She was Lieutenant Megan Hartley, a newly assigned operations liaison. Megan was about 30, tall and athletic, with pale skin that freckled along her arms and a long braid of red hair falling over one shoulder. Her expression held a natural confidence softened by an easy humor. She had the look of someone raised outdoors, sun-touched cheeks, sharp blue eyes, and the quiet steadiness of a person who had learned early how to balance authority and empathy. "You must be Sergeant Adams," Megan said. "I've heard about your efficiency and your very loyal companion." She glanced at Ranger, who was studying her with calm but laser-focused attention. Megan crouched slightly, extending a hand. Ranger didn't move. Lily almost warned her, but then Ranger leaned in, sniffed her fingers, and allowed the briefest touch to his head. Megan grinned. "Friendly enough? That's a good sign." Lily didn't return the smile. "He just wants to know who everyone is." "Well," Megan replied, "I'm the poor soul assigned to coordinate schedules between your department and the incoming SEAL crew tomorrow." Lily stiffened slightly. "SEALs?" "Yeah. Commander Green's detachment. They're arriving at dawn." The words hit harder than they should have. Ranger's ears perked sharply, his tail lowering to half-mast as if the name carried weight. Megan didn't notice. "Anyway," she continued, "they sent ahead a preliminary requisition list. Looks like you're the main point of contact." She handed Lily a folder. Lily accepted it, but her fingers trembled faintly. Ranger pressed against her leg, sensing her shift in mood. Megan tilted her head. "Are you okay?" "Fine," Lily murmured, though her pulse fluttered uneasily. Megan nodded, though her eyes lingered longer than casual curiosity. "If you need anything, I'm down the hall in Ops. Don't hesitate." She stepped away with a friendly wave. Ranger watched her until she disappeared. Lily inhaled deeply, steadying herself. The folder felt heavier than it should. She didn't want to open it. Not yet. As she turned down the hallway, Ranger suddenly stopped. His entire posture sharpened, ears forward, tail stiff. Lily followed his gaze. A man was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, watching them. He wore the brown undershirt of the engineering corps and dust-smudged boots. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes, dark, heavy, and unsettlingly perceptive, tracked every movement Ranger made. Sergeant Hal Bishop, mid-30s, tall and lean, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, was known across the base for his quiet competence and uncomfortably sharp intuition. His face was angular, cheekbones pronounced, chin rough with dark stubble. Years working disaster response had carved premature lines around his eyes. Lines that came from seeing too many collapsed roofs, too many broken infrastructures, too many frantic evacuations where he'd arrived just seconds too late. He was a good man beneath it, but one who rarely spoke unless words were necessary. Lily didn't know him well, but she knew of him. Hal pushed off the wall and approached with slow, measured steps. "That dog," he said, nodding at Ranger. "Looks like he remembers something." Lily's throat tightened. "He remembers many things." Hal studied Ranger's posture, then Lily's. His gaze sharpened. "And you look like you do, too." "Do you need something, Sergeant Bishop?" Lily asked, too quickly. Hal's mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost concern. "No, just passing through." But as he walked away, he glanced back over his shoulder, eyes lingering not on Lily, but on Ranger, as though he recognized a telltale look only seasoned responders shared, the look of a survivor sensing the storm returning. Lily exhaled shakily. She continued down the hallway, Ranger glued to her side as she delivered the forms. When she stepped back outside, the late summer sky was shifting into the deep orange of early evening. Ranger paused at the doorway, nose lifted, as though tasting the wind. Lily knelt beside him, pressing her forehead lightly to his. "They're coming back," she whispered, voice breaking at the edges. "All of them. And I don't know if I'm ready." Ranger nudged her chin gently, an old gesture, one that had once kept panic from swallowing her whole during a calm blackout years ago. She closed her eyes. The chapter ends here, with Lily accepting that the SEAL detachment's arrival will force her to face the mission she once survived alongside Ranger. Dawn broke over Elkridge in a wash of molten gold, the early sun spilling across Ridgepoint Base like a slow revelation. The air was still cool enough to breathe easily, though the promise of heat already shimmered faintly on the horizon. Lily Adams stood at the edge of the tarmac, with Ranger sitting beside her, the old German shepherd's fur stirred gently by the morning breeze. His posture was alert, but not tense, poised, almost ceremonial, as though he knew dawn itself had brought something inevitable. A low rumble vibrated across the ground. Engines, large ones. Lily braced herself as the first convoy vehicle crested the small rise near the gate, followed by two more. Dust plumed behind them in soft arcs. Ranger rose to his feet, tail stiff, ears forward, eyes narrowing, with a memory he had never forgotten. Lily swallowed. "I know," she whispered. "They're here." The first man to step out was Commander Noah Green, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the simple desert uniform like a second skin. He was in his early 50s, hair nearly silver but cut close to his skull, his jawline sharp beneath a neatly maintained beard. His face bore the quiet, immovable confidence of a man who had led teams through darkness most soldiers would never witness. Deep lines creased the corners of his gray-blue eyes, lines made from years of desert glare, ocean salt, and the weight of decisions that shaped whether men lived or died. Yet beneath the hardened exterior was a stern compassion, the kind built from losing friends and vowing never to waste the lives he still commanded. He surveyed the tarmac with the sharpness of a hawk measuring threats. But then his eyes caught Ranger, then Lily, and his entire body went still. He didn't move toward her. Not yet. Just watched, as though confirming she was real. Several other SEALs began unloading equipment behind him. One was Petty Officer Jace Harlow, mid-20s, lean with a runner's build and long arms. His brown hair curled slightly under his cap, and his face carried a constant smirk that masked the grief he carried. The grief of losing a younger brother 2 years earlier while deployed. A wound he hid behind humor and endless energy. Jace noticed Ranger first and whistled low. He looks ancient, but like ancient in a wise wizard kind of way. Ranger shot him a glare. Jace blinked. Okay, maybe wizard with attitude. Another SEAL exited the second truck. Chief Warrant Officer Brett Mallory, late 30s, tall with a rugged, unshaven jaw and deep-set green eyes. His frame was powerful, but carried a slight unevenness in his left leg, a limp that lingered from a building collapse rescue he'd barely survived 3 years prior. Brett was quiet, introspective, and spoke only when he felt words mattered. Lily had never met him, but there was an intensity in his gaze that reminded her uncomfortably of Hal Bishop, the look of someone who recognized ghosts of personas in others because he carried his own. He regarded Lily with curiosity, but not judgment. Then came the fourth SEAL, Specialist Vincent Vince Kerr, nearly 6'3", muscular with broad shoulders and short black hair shaved close at the sides. Vince had a square jaw dusted with dark stubble and intense brown eyes that rarely softened. His expression was stern by default, but not cruel. Just the natural face of a man whose childhood had been defined by protecting 2 younger siblings after his father walked out. The responsibility had hardened him, turning him into someone who watched everything and trusted almost nothing. When he saw Ranger, his posture shifted slightly. Not fear, but respect. "Old boy's seen things," Vince murmured. "A lot of things." Jace snorted. "Pretty sure he's older than the base." Ranger huffed dismissively. Lily forced her breathing steady. The SEALs noticed her now, one by one. Recognition sparked in Commander Green's eyes, not the kind shared in public, but the private kind, bound to a battlefield no one else had lived. He approached slowly, each footstep measured. Lily felt every muscle tighten, though Ranger stayed at her side, unmoving. "Sergeant Adams," Green said, voice low but strong. She lifted her chin. "Commander?" For a moment he simply looked at her, the woman who had once guided his team through a mission soaked in dust, chaos, and static-laced radios. He seemed to weigh unspoken memories between them. Then he nodded. Not a greeting, a confirmation. Jace jogged closer, carrying a duffel over one shoulder. "You must be the logistics sergeant. Heard you're the person who keeps this place running." Lily's voice was steady, though her heart hammered with past and present colliding. "I do what I can." Brett and Vince joined them, forming a loose half-circle. Ranger stepped slightly forward, sniffing the air around the men before settling again. Jace pointed at the dog. "He yours?" "Not exactly," Lily answered. "He just remembers me." Green's expression shifted subtly, the first shadow of emotion crossing his face. Brett glanced at Ranger, then back at Lily. "He remembers something," he said softly. "Maybe someone." Lily felt the world tilt, memories swirling around her like the dust rising from the convoy tires. She forced the images away. The valley, the gunfire, the radio static, the sound of Ranger barking at her voice through a broken headset. She lifted her clipboard. "I have the equipment manifests ready for your team." Green nodded, voice gentler. "We'll review them with you." Ranger pressed against her leg. It was almost imperceptible, but Lily felt it like a lifeline. Because this morning wasn't simply a welcome, it was an awakening. And the chapter ends here, with Lily standing face to face with the men whose lives once depended on her voice in the dark. The heat rose steadily as morning deepened over Ridgepoint Base, blurring the edges of the tarmac until everything shimmered like a half-forgotten dream. Lily Adams walked alongside the SEAL detachment and Ranger, the old German shepherd keeping tight at her heel, his gaze flicking constantly between familiar faces and distant perimeters. Even in his age, he held himself with the poise of a sentinel who had once stood between life and death and remembered every second. Commander Noah Green matched Lily's pace, though he kept a respectful distance. The others formed a loose cluster around them as they made their way toward the logistics hangar. The silence between the group was palpable but not hostile, more like the silence before a truth shifted. Jace Harlow kept bouncing on his heels, adjusting the strap of his duffel with restless energy. Brett Mallory walked steadily, his limp barely noticeable but always present, while Vincent Kerr scanned each rooftop and corridor as though expecting ghosts to materialize. Lily felt their tension like static brushing her skin. Inside the hangar, the air cooled. Boxes were stacked in long rows, shadowed under steel beams. Lily set her clipboard on a table but didn't begin. She could feel eyes on her. Curiosity, recognition, and questions none of them had voiced. Before the stillness could choke the room, the sound of boots clacking broke in. Sergeant Olivia Brandt, the hangar's quartermaster, approached with a measured stride. Olivia was a tall woman in her late 20s with square shoulders, pale skin touched lightly by freckles, and tightly braided blonde hair that ran down the back of her uniform with absolute precision. Her sharp gray eyes and firm jaw gave her an intimidating presence, yet her manner was always fair, shaped by growing up as the oldest of 5 siblings and learning early how to manage chaos with calm, assertive efficiency. "Commander Green," Olivia greeted, offering a crisp nod. "We've reserved this bay for your team. Sergeant Adams will handle distribution." She glanced briefly at Lily and Ranger, her expression respectful but focused. Olivia treated everyone equally, whether they were SEALs or supply clerks. "Thank you, Sergeant Brandt," Green replied. Olivia stepped back, allowing Lily to continue, but Lily's breath hitched faintly. She forced herself forward, opening the manifest folder. "Your equipment is sorted into sections," she began. "You'll need to confirm serials, but everything should be accounted for." "Should be?" Jace teased lightly, grinning. "That's not very reassuring." Lily raised her eyes, level and calm. "If there's a problem, it won't be on my end." Jace blinked. "Right. Noted." Vincent cracked a rare, amused smirk. Brett's gaze remained steady, quietly observing. Ranger suddenly let out a soft, low whine, not of fear, but memory. Lily felt the vibration travel through her leg, grounding her. She inhaled slowly. "Sergeant Adams," Green said gently, stepping closer, but not too close. "You don't have to guide us through everything alone. We can—" Lily shook her head more sharply than she intended. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Ranger's body pressed against her side, sensing it. Olivia, perceptive in her own way, cleared her throat. "I'll leave you to the inspection. Let me know if you need additional hands." She walked off, her boots echoing through the large space. The moment she disappeared, Brett stepped forward. "Sergeant Adams," he said quietly, "may I ask you something?" Lily felt her stomach knot. "What?" "Why didn't you ever tell anyone you knew us?" Lily tightened her grip on the clipboard. "It wasn't necessary." "Necessary?" Jace echoed incredulously. "You saved us. You saved—" Green raised a hand gently, silencing him. Ranger moved, placing himself halfway between Lily and the world, his tail lowered, his gaze steady. He wasn't guarding, he was grounding her. Lily closed her eyes for a moment. The hangar around her, the hum of lights, the scent of oiled metal, the faint scrape of crates shifting, faded into the desert valley years ago. Static on a radio, screams swallowed by wind, Ranger's voice barking over a comm channel, desperate and alive. Vincent's deep voice broke the silence. "You're different than what they say about logistics." Lily's eyes snapped open. "They don't know me." "Maybe they should," Brett said quietly. Green stepped forward, gaze softening. "You were the reason we made it out. And Ranger, too. We never forgot." Ranger nudged Lily's hand, urging her gently. For the first time that morning, Lily found her voice without armor. "I didn't want to be remembered for that. I didn't want the noise or attention." She hesitated. "I just wanted peace." Jace exchanged a look with Brett. Vincent folded his arms. Green exhaled slowly. Brett spoke softly. "Peace is earned, and it's okay to carry the truth that earned it." Lily looked down. Ranger's amber eyes met hers. Steady, patient, forgiving. When she lifted her head again, the seals weren't staring with awe or pity, just recognition, shared survival. The quiet bond forged not from glory, but from fear, grit, and impossible decisions. Lily didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The chapter ends here, with Lily standing among the seals who once trusted her in the dark, aware that the truth she avoided is now rising, quietly, unavoidably, into the light. In the quiet corners of life, where battles are fought in silence and courage often hides behind gentle eyes, we are reminded that miracles do not always arrive with thunder or trumpets. Sometimes, they come in the form of a weary soldier who keeps showing up, a loyal dog who never forgets, or a moment of truth that rises like dawn after a long night. Lily Adams never sought glory. She never wanted her name spoken in hero stories. Yet grace touched her life in a way only God Himself could weave. Through survival, through second chances, and through the unexpected return of a friend who once barked for her in the dark. Ranger was not just a dog. He was a reminder that God places guardians in our lives long before we know we need them. And maybe that is the quiet message meant for all of us today. God sends help in forms we don't always recognize, and strength in moments we don't believe we can endure. Sometimes the miracle is not that we walk out of the fire, but that love walks out with us. So as you return to your own daily battles, your family, your health, your heartbreaks, the little storms no one else sees, remember this: you are not alone. You are watched over. You are beloved. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to pray for your city. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our community as we continue sharing stories of courage, compassion, and the small miracles God still works in this world. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you, just as He guided Lily, just as He guided Ranger, and just as He guides every soul who walks this earth searching for light. Amen.